Welcome back to season 3 of ABCDEI. I'm Rohini Mukherjee.
And I'm Susan Diaz.
Today, we're going to continue our deep dive into some of the topics that we have discussed in season 1 and 2. Today, we're going to be talking about ageism. We know that age is just a number, but we don't treat it like that. We have so much bias and so many preconceived notions around somebody's age. Too old to do something, too young to do something. And unlike race or gender or other more personal forms of identity, age is a universal truth. We're all going to be in our teens, we're all going to be in our 20s, and we're all going to be in our 70s. So if you are looking for a place to embrace the discomfort of checking your biases, age might be a good place to start.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's interesting to me in particular because the entire construct of the workplace is taking pride in calling out that age. It's like, oh, the boomers and the Gen X and the millennials and the number of articles that have been written about that kind of thing. I think that moving away from those silos and starting to see it a bit more fully is the need of the hour. So we spoke to two specific people for this. The first was Jacqui D'Eon, who is a communications consultant, a university instructor to young people, and an older adult. She came in and spoke to us about the various things that she sees in that journey. And on the other end of the scale, and highly close to my heart, was my 10-year-old, who's currently virtual schooling, came in to chat about the way she sees the world. And some of the biases I notice in that area in particular, I can speak to Rohini, which is that the virtual schooling thing has been a battle. There's no denying that. That said, there's a lot of nostalgia in the way we look at it. And we're like, oh, children must do it this way and they must learn that way. And the fact remains that especially children who are differently abled physically and visible minorities are perhaps more comfortable in a virtual environment because there's aspects to school like bullying and being outcast because you look different, which is not things that we understand. So have a listen to this curation on the universal truth of aging. Welcome to ABCDEI, a podcast that explores topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion through stories of distinct and powerful lived experiences.
If you are tired of the preaching, shaming, and theory about why inclusion matters and just want to create change already, then you're in the right place.
Join us as we unlearn bias one alphabet at a time. My name is Susan Diaz.
And I'm Rohini Mukherjee.
Today, we're going to touch on the discussion around ageism, and we have with us a guest who can speak to that from a couple of ends of that discussion, both from their lived experience as an older adult, as well as experience from being an educator and teaching much younger people. So that said, Rohini, would you like to set up our guest?
Sure. So Jacqui D'Eon is the founder and owner of Jade Communications, and also the author of Stuff Happens, a fact we just found out a few minutes ago, and is a crisis training and executive coaching professional with a lot of experience. And Jacqui, so happy to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I think I just want to build on what Susan talked about, and I think that was, one of the reasons we really want to talk to you is you really have the experience and the knowledge of the ageism on both sides of the spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. So I met you when I taught your York University class, and I saw your students come alive, with the discussion that you were having with them. So talk to us about, both sides of it.
Yeah, I mean, from a student's perspective, they go to school, they gain some skills, and then they go out and they present those skills to the workplace. And oftentimes what the workplace or what an organization says to them will come back to us when you're experienced. And the frustration that they have is, well, how am I supposed to get experience if no one's going to hire me? And so those skills lay dormant or are underutilized when they do get to a workplace. They become the person that just bangs out stuff on a keyboard to get them into social media or whatever, but they're not asked or valued for using their brain for some of the skills that they bring to the workforce. On the flip side of that is the aged folks like me, fine wine. And while we have many times have the experience, many times we've had the high-powered jobs and all the responsibilities, we still want to be able to contribute, but not particularly the way that a younger person who's on their way up through the organization might. And very often those people look at us and say, well, she's going to be competing with me for my next promotion, or she's going to do this differently, or she's going to judge me. When the reality is, if you open your mind to those both sides of that, you have an opportunity to learn from each other and build skills together. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about having multiple generations in a workplace, because we can all learn to work together. One of my favorite stories, and it's not a workplace one, but I saw it a long time ago, was where there's a retirement home somewhere in the States, and they didn't have all their rooms filled. And so what they did is they invited university students to take up residence in the retirement home. And the university students then were cross-mentored and vice versa with the retirees. And it turned out to be a great community because there was great camaraderie, and the students happened to be music students, so they also performed in the common spaces when they were doing their rehearsals. But that's a really interesting way of looking at the opportunities of multi-generational learning. It's not a competition. It's about getting things done and having diverse perspectives brought to that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it speaks to these assumptions that are made on all sides of it, which are completely avoidable. And in my experience, there are lots of wonderful stories of like smaller environments, smaller communities that have been built, even in the case of workplaces, when you're earlier in the startup phase and sort of more agile, there tends to be like an ability to facilitate that communication between people more easily and achieve that camaraderie. But something seems to get lost as it scales, and the discussions don't maybe happen as naturally as they should, and they really need to get facilitated. So in your experience as an educator, like what are some of those ways in which we can foster that discussion so people can be getting the best from each other instead of seeing this as a competition, like you said?
Well, it's like everything else in the inclusion space, the diversity and inclusion space. It's taking away those biases. If only we were all unable to make assumptions about individuals and just accept their credentials and the skills that they bring to the party, that would make a big difference. But I think it's up to the leadership in many organizations to create the environment where that happens, to make sure that people feel comfortable in speaking up, to make sure that there is an environment or a culture of trust where people can express a contrarian point of view without being singled out for being miserable or different or uninformed, whatever it happens to be, not creating that judgment. And leaders have to create that environment for the people that work with them so that others can foster that as well. So it's the valuing of the thinking, it's the valuing of the skill set and making that work. And that's done in a microcosm, but it's also done on a broader scale. It's understanding the values that are present within the organization. And one bad actor can really upset the apple cart. We know that. And how do you deal with disagreement and bullies and those kinds of people within the organization. Those are important things.
From a systemic level, especially at a time when, fast growth is celebrated, this startup culture is the coolest thing in the world. Like, let's stock up with our, nut bars and energy juices, and, we will conquer the world. It's hard enough being a 40-something in that world and feeling too dated. How does that, that being the complete, and then that goes so far beyond, right? I don't mean to make it sound like that's one cliche, but it goes so far beyond into the way in which people put the ads out. It's the content that you receive on your standard feeds. Like, everything is so geared for you're at the start of your life. Conquering the world isn't the only option, and faster, bigger, stronger. How does it feel to connect to that world, saying that I have what I have, I am confident in it, I want to interact with you, and also feeling like this world isn't welcoming me?
And I'm gonna contradict you there, Susan, because I don't think it's that the world doesn't welcome me. It's just I haven't found a way to be connected. So what I love about that startup world, what I love about those startup projects and young people in the offices, is their energy and their enthusiasm and their desire to get ahead and get things done. And I can identify with all of that because I remember a younger me when I was like that. And the fact that they're speaking languages and doing things that I know nothing about offers me the opportunity to learn something.
Right.
So what I can offer them is a little bit of wisdom, been there, done that, don't try it that way kind of thing. And I don't mean to be a naysayer that way, but I also want to understand why they try to do things the way they do it and try to figure out, well, do you think that might work? Like, there's nothing, a group of 20-somethings are doing a startup company and they're very enthusiastic about their technology and all that kind of stuff, right? And they need first level funding. Well, guess who they're going to for first level funding? It isn't another group of 20-year-olds. It's usually people that look like me. They've got gray hair. They've been around the block and they've seen lots of startups. So part of my wisdom that I can bring to them is say, okay, let's bottle that enthusiasm and let's now put it in the context of the person who's got the money and what's important to them. And so I can act as a bridge between what they want and the person that they need to get it from. And I think that's where a lot of opportunity gets lost with older people in the workforce, is that the younger folks don't understand that we have something to offer them, that bridge, and potentially also to help them avoid making some very costly mistakes along the way.
And some amazing energy. Sorry there, Rohini. And some amazing energy. There's times in my life where some people have said to me, I would never have been allowed to do it that way when I was your age. So you go do it because that's awesome, right? That's sure. the flip side of the cautionary as well. So I love that.
Yeah. And it depends on the person, right? I mean, some people are old fogies, right? And they're not going to accept the new ways. And, they're always going to be saying, oh, no, don't do it that way. Don't do it that way. But the reality is that not all older people are naysayers, and not all older people are unwilling to think that they've got something to learn.
Oh, yeah. And there's plenty of young naysayers, too. Right? I mean, that's a personality type. But I agree. I mean, I think somewhere at the intersection of energy and experience, is the way forward, right? You want to have the perspective and the depth of somebody who's done that or something in the same, area code as that, and has a different perspective. At the same time, we see this. I mean, as marketers, we all see the scramble to understand Gen Z. What do they do? What do they want? What are they motivated by? So it has to be a give and take. And And so, I mean, I think what you've shared is so helpful because it does help really to see kind of both sides of that as well.
Yeah, and I think that the danger with marketing is assuming that all Gen Zs are the same or Gen Ys are the same, or that all people that grew up in Halifax like I did think the same way. We're all individuals, and so looking at things from different lenses makes a difference. And you're both in the communications world, so you know that what resonates with an audience is very much dependent on where that audience is coming from and what their shared experience is, right?
One of the things that, we chatted a little bit about, and I'd love your input on, is the balance between asking questions about how somebody would like to be addressed, treated, what's the best way to, work with you. My personal view is I would rather be asked even sometimes silly questions if it helps collaboration. What's your viewpoint on that? And how can we navigate differences?
I'm with you 100%. However, having said that, I know that some people find asking the question difficult because they may be embarrassed by the question, that it displays their ignorance, or that it uncovers a bias that they may have by asking it. And then some people are offended by the question itself.
I guess then, Jacqui, one of the questions I'd have for you from the perspective of this discussion, I know that there are some answers, and I tend to fall on the slightly less tolerant end of the scale, where I feel like in 2021, many of us should be able to Google almost anything and give ourselves that lowest common denominator level of knowledge, especially depending on the circles. And I'd argue most of us would have to expand our circles. But even within that, there's so many things that we interact with on a daily basis that we need to be prepared for. So that said, what are your perspectives on self-education? Like, what is the onus is on each of us to educate ourselves into lived experiences beyond our own, into being able to, okay, that doesn't sound familiar to me. I don't know an exact situation in which that happened, but perhaps there's a metaphor that I can do to draw that back to my life. Maybe there's a mentor, a buddy that you have coffee with, or some other safe space, like you said, that you can begin to broach these discussions in without actually assaulting it and making the job of the person who's undergoing that difference, let's call it, to explain it to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I consider myself to be a lifelong learner, and I consider myself to be relatively inclusive. That said, I know that I've got a lot of biases. I know that those exist. And I know that I come from a very different culture than the two of you were raised in, for example. So there's things that you have that I don't understand. And I think it's the way in which I might approach the question that would help. The more I think about, and I'm very philosophical about inclusion generally, the more I think about inclusion, it really is basic human kindness. Take your blinders off, open your mind, and come at it from a point of help me to understand what's meaningful to you and how I can help you and how you can help me. Bottom line, that's all it is.
Yeah.
When you come right down to it, that's it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, and yet it's so difficult.
We're going to switch things up a little bit today because we're actually going to go back to our origin story of why we're called ABCDEI and getting unstuck from the way we adult through DEI by going back to unlearning like a child. So I'm going to throw it to my co-host Susan in a second. But I think when we thought about this episode, we wanted to take what we see as the biggest barriers to learning and unlearning in adults. So that's ego, that's empathy, and that's education. and reframing it in the perspective of a child. Because while we have a lot to teach them, we actually stand a lot to learn from them. So over to you, Susan.
Yep. Thank you. So today we have a somewhat special guest. And for those who can see the video, it's my little. Her name is Yara Stone, and she's going to be 10 years old. Welcome to the show, Yara.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
That's awesome. So one of the first things that I wanted to ask you, Yara, was when you're in your virtual school, or even before that, when you were in real school, and you have to think about each other's feelings, and make sure that you're not hurting anybody's feelings, or you're understanding things from other people's perspective, that you know how to do that. So yesterday you told me a story about your friend Jade. Can you tell me about that story in Salsa?
Yeah, so we were playing Roblox on a FaceTime call earlier in the day, and then she had to go, so we ended the call. And she said, "Can we call later?" Yes, because I said yes, because I didn't know that we had an event planned. But then when I immediately found out, I waited a few minutes, and then I typed the message to her and sent it so she would know not to call me.
Okay, and why did you take a minute, even though you were very excited to go out and play with your friends outdoors? Why did you take a minute to send her that note?
Because it's more important to make sure your friends know where you are. Because I know how it feels. Like if your friends miss your calls constantly, you just feel like sad and empty inside, and no one's there. Sometimes that's personally how I feel. But so I think I should let her know so she doesn't feel the same.
So you want to treat her the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's such a powerful message in that. I mean, if you take every workplace communication breakdown, every government policy, and look at, okay, what if I was a refugee, a new mom, an immigrant, and how would I feel, or how could I feel? And then work backwards from there. I mean, I would guarantee you're already in a better place when it comes to true inclusion, if you can actually put yourself in those shoes.
To break it down to that simplified level, right? Like treat someone the way you would like to be treated. I think we know this cerebrally, but we fall down in the practice.
Yeah, and even extending that to treat somebody how they want to be treated, because that's the other part of it too, is that of course, you want the lens of, I have felt left out, or I have felt, excluded, or I have felt like I got picked on, but also give them the space that maybe that's not their experience, right? And so I think it's the 3 steps. So put yourself in their shoes, treat them how you'd want to be treated, and think about whether they want to be treated differently than how you would approach it as well. So I think there's a really powerful lesson there. Yara, I have a follow-up question for you. So this is more of a scenario, right? So let's say your friend J, your friend M, and your friend R are all heading to the playground. And you've decided that you're going to meet outside at 4. You haven't really made a plan further than that. You're just going to meet and take it from there. So let's say you meet there and you come, with a baseball bat. Your friend comes, thinking that you might be planting, flowers in the community garden. And 2 other friends want to play video games, but outdoors. How do you decide what you do?
That's a hard one. But either we look back into the past things we do and we all agree on it, or we just make up a new game as we go, or we just go exploring around the neighborhood.
So you don't necessarily say, well, I said my idea first, so I should go. Or we always go with Yara's idea, so let's go with somebody else's.
No, that's just rude. Same like voting is also a little rude. So we either make up new games, explore the neighborhood, or just look back into the past games. Or just agree on one of the games we already have.
I love that, because you're taking ego out of it. You're taking Yara's not necessarily the boss. It's the idea. It's how everybody feels. And you're taking structure out of it. So you're not, nobody's the manager, nobody's the director. It's just this person has a great idea. And, we're just picking ice cream or water balloons or Roblox. It's the idea.
Okay, should we talk a little bit about learning, Yara?
Yeah.
Do you like to learn?
Yeah, I love learning. Just sometimes I find it hard and my mind just goes into this frustration state that it just starts to take over my whole entire life. Over now, when my mommy and my daddy and my teacher and all my friends are with me, I can go through and just restore my mind back to me.
So what happens when you get frustrated with the learning? What makes you frustrated with learning?
Sometimes, I used to get so scared and frustrated whenever the teacher brought up multiplication or division. Those were the two things I could never do in math. But now, with I learned how to do division on a multiplication table.
So what did you do? How did that change? How did something which was frustrating you and you were finding it difficult to learn about it?
I meditated, breaths in and out, and just remembered I would never get into trouble. I just need to simply ask the teacher. The teacher is always there, even if she's not if she's potentially with a student, she's still there. She can help. Just hold off on your question and then she'll help you.
I promise this is not coached, folks. Rohini can attest to the fact that there was zero prep involved in this. I did not make her say these things. But I think what stands out for me over there is that unprompted thing of take a deep breath, take a meditation, whatever that is, and then come back and speak to someone who can help you with it. So often I find things come to a halt with inclusion discussions and stuff because someone's feeling like they're doing all of the right things, or from their perspective, again, going back to the first point, maybe you're not seeing the lack of empathy, but you're feeling like you're doing all of the things and you're frustrated. And this is certainly something to think about. Take a deep breath and go to someone who it may or may not be a teacher in the life of a grown-up, but
Google's
somebody
a teacher.
around there. Google's a teacher. Let's say that again.
Yeah, but sometimes I don't always rely on Google because I don't want to get all my things solved by just the device that can always be helped for something.
Yeah.
I want to learn by myself. That's learning. Otherwise, you're just cheating for the answers.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
The way that you like to learn, whether it's using Google, and I should say when we say Google, it's you use the speaker Google more than Googling on the screen. Do you?
Yeah, the one right behind my mouth.
Yeah. Okay. So has that changed? Have you is that because you're doing virtual school now, or did you always do it that way? Is anything different after the pandemic?
I used to really badly want to do it. I really badly wanted to just use the answers that are already there. But I said if I want to be smart, move on to the next grade, and move on to the next age, I need to actually learn and prove on in that place. That's what the right side of my brain always says. The smarter side says, you should prove that you can do it to yourself. Just prove that you can do it to yourself. The other one just says, cheat. But I don't listen to the other one.
But I do like that idea because I think it goes to, a theme we've explored on this podcast a lot, which is the monolith, right? So if you Google, you are certainly at the risk of finding one perspective and saying, all immigrants must feel that way, or all new parents must feel that way. So I do like the corroborating with people who identify, or they're teachers, or they're just people with lived experience, because then you're getting nuance and you're getting diversity.
Mm-hmm. There's a sort of an instinctive understanding of the fact that not everything that pops up on a machine is accurate, which I think
there could be a million answers to the one question, but only one is right, and the one answer is not on Google.
Yeah. So I think there's certainly something there, which there's an instinctive understanding of that, which we would all as grown-ups do well to remember.
Lots of food for thought. But I mean, I think for me, breaking it down and taking some of the structure, taking out hierarchy, taking out titles, taking out the need for speed with just fastest answer first. I think there's so many ways that we've taken education and certainly our experience and wisdom over years, but in many ways, sometimes they block our ability to really unlearn. And this is certainly very inspiring as a way to, take a bit of a fresh start to learning.
Yeah, take it back to some basics, right? I mean, some of the big words that we run our lives by really come back to some basic concepts. And I think for me, what stood out, Yara, is like, if all of the options suggested don't work, then make up something new, because
like not always in the history, many even you don't always want to do that person's idea. Like if some people like you don't always want to do that video. Like just like a dare, you don't always want to pick one thing. Like you don't always want to pick truth. You don't always want to pick dare. Like switch around sometimes. Switch it up. Like mix it up. Make your life interesting. Make it interesting.
For decades, I always spent my time when it came to the inclusion discussion, feeling very like I will fix the injustices in front of my face, and I will have my discussions with people in small circles solicited, but I would never go public with any of my opinions because I was like, what do I know? Or, nothing is actively messing with me right now. I'm just going to be quiet and stay in the background. And some of that changed in my role as a mom. And this right here, this little Yara, is a large part of the motivation. It's a large part of the reason why when I have metaphors, whether it's in my communication job or it's on this podcast, the metaphors are, they draw from childlikeness, because I think that's one of the things, the stories, the rhymes, the tales, those are all like literary devices that kids instinctively get. And sometimes I think that helps when it comes to conversations in the inclusion space, just reminding ourselves that if we can take it back to the level of a child, we're probably not going to fail.
Yeah.
Can I have a closing question for you, Yara?
Yeah.
Do you see color? Like, do you, when you deal with lots of other kids, do you know that your color is different? Do you notice it?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I do notice it.
Mm-hmm.
But like for me, like my mom, like I do often something that you should never do. Like I often think I'm always respectful to the other kids, but I'm never respectful to myself. Like I always trash talk myself and make myself feel sad I make myself feel sad about my gender, my skin color.
Why?
And my overall look.
Why?
Compared to everyone else just looks better and prettier. But I learned that that's not true. Everyone's either the same amount, the same equalization of beauty, or no one's beautiful.
If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to hit subscribe and please drop us a review. If you want to learn more about us or the ABCDEI podcast, visit abcdei.ca.